The real quality was the friends we met along the way. I'm Ray Myers. Welcome to Craft versus Cruft. And today we have a special guest, Hris Koleva, a quality expert from Europe. And I'll let you introduce yourself, talk about some of the things you're working on first off.
Hi, Ray. Thank you for having me. Quality expert. It's a strong word, but I've been doing quality assurance for 17 years now. Various projects, been there, done that for many issues and challenges. And the recent years, I've been building a consulting career, helping startups mainly to find their way to high quality processes and deliver high quality products, because startups are probably the ones that are most lost in translation about quality. And last news are that I'm organizing a conference.
Yes. Tell us about QualityCon.
QualityCon, imagine. One of the goals for this year was to talk about my recent workshop, user story analysis. It's a collaborative, agile practice, a whole team approach. I'll tell you more on that. While I was submitting my applications to various conferences, big or smaller, around the world, I thought to myself that I was missing the quality focus. There were technical conferences, development conferences, DevOps conferences, agile conferences, testing conferences, and somehow I was missing the pure quality-driven software development and prioritizing quality above speed, above scope. Quality. Does it matter? Where is the customer? Where we are in our relationships with them, and etc. etc. So right now our heavy organization until October the 10th. It's an online conference, so pretty accessible. Symbolic tickets only to cover the technical provisioning, and I have already the great minds lined up. So exciting news.
Excellent. Well, we'll stay tuned for the announcements on that, and whatever links you've got on that, we'll throw that in the description. I'm really I'm happy to see what happens, and congratulations on your first conference. Now, the original tagline for Craft versus Cruft is Meditations on Software Quality, and a question that I always I would love to have an interview candidate in and just spend a whole a half hour on this question, but I've yet to find someone I felt like being that cruel to. So you get it. What is quality?
My favorite question. Quality is the attitude to life for me. I've meditated a lot on this question. And yes, quality is an attitude to life, because as users, as people, as humans, we take quality for granted. We expect quality. And I was thinking about, I think it was several months ago, I was doing a presentation and I started with that question, and I wondered, I was thinking, what is the basic human definition of quality, and what would be the thing that we can't live without its high quality? So my presentation started with a picture of a very polluted city, because air quality is something that is an absolute human need and right. We cannot live without clean air. And then we can decompose it or interpret it in various ways. This is what quality is. We need quality as humans, as users, and consumers, as communicating to each other. We need quality, and we take it for granted. And it's an amazing paradox that when we talk about software companies, tech companies, and software vendors, we forget that we're users ourselves. And while we expect and take quality for granted as users, we forget that we need to provide the same quality levels to our users. So it's a basic human right and human need, and it's not that expensive also.
I love this. Quality is a human right. I'm going to use that. You have an idea that I think is really, a lot of people would find counterintuitive, trying to zero in on quality at the point that a user story is created. Now, playing a little dumb here, how could quality be over there? We're building the thing over here. We're deploying it. We're testing it over here. How would the quality be over in the user story? Why do I need to look there for quality? That seemingly is the one place I'm not looking.
And to add to your question, we will never get it done if we start looking at the user story. This is the response I get when I start talking about start with the user story. But we will never get it done. The thing is that not only we will get it done, but we will get it done in a better quality and much faster. Why? With all these years, 17, I like the number. It recently become 17, so I'm repeating it. I've seen so many bugs. I tried to approximately calculate them for another talk I was giving. I think I've reported something around 5,000 bugs in my career. And I'm not exaggerating. This is kind of the conservative approximation.
So the first 5,000 bugs are the hardest.
Yeah, and for sure the first 5,000 bugs are the hardest, then they start repeating themselves. Most of them were due to misinterpreted and misunderstood requirements or missing requirements. Most of them should have been requirements. Most of the test cases we've written should have been requirements.
Because almost by definition, if they wrote it as a requirement, that is what people knew to check for. So if something is going to be missed, it's almost by definition going to be, it's either a missing requirement or it's a misinterpreted requirement or it's a misimplemented requirement. But a huge part of that is just what wasn't specified, right?
Exactly. It wasn't specified, and it's kind of ridiculous because it's not that we didn't have time for it. Usually what takes most of the time for a user story to go to production, it's not the implementation time, it's not the coding time, it's not the testing time, it's not the fixing time. It's the time between that sentence was written to that sentence went into progress. It's the lead time of that user story. And it's usually months. And it's really something that bothers me a lot because these couple of months were wasted and then we try to squeeze it in 2 weeks and measure whether we've done it for 2 days or two, and we kind of get very cheap on.
Yeah. Was it a 3 or a 5 after it's been in the hopper for 2 months, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I am on a mission to start using those months efficiently and using those so-called refinement meetings efficiently. I love the refinement meetings. Here are 10 user stories. Do you have any questions? No, they look fine. And then 2 months later, none of them are implemented properly. And all the clarifications are in comments, in Jira, or any other tool. Requirements in comments. This is what's happening. Requirements in comments, in pull request reviews. And this is really a huge waste of time. And then why are you not ready? We're not ready because we didn't specify.
So you're in charge now. What do we do? Those are things you don't want to see. You don't want to see things, waiting around for months, maybe being implemented where all the context has been lost. All these sort of comments going back and forth, these sort of ad hoc exchanges about the requirements. What should people do?
I have a very simple proposal. I don't say it's a remedy, of course, or panacea, but it's a practice, and it's pretty much an agenda for the refinement meetings. It's an agenda with, I should have opened it somewhere, with 6 topics. It's a checklist. The goal is that a team should be following this checklist, or this agenda should be able to really do proper analysis and refinement of 3 or 4 user stories for an hour and a half, let's say. So 20 minutes per user story. And they will be much more confident in that user story and how to plan it and how to implement it and how to test it. So what does it entail? It's a practice. It's actually a Miro board. So I've been thinking how to make it engaging, how to make people use it, and right now I'm a huge fan of Miro. It was a long, steep learning curve, but I've grown to be a huge fan, and this template is already on the Miroverse, so it's public. It's called.
And we will link to it. You'll be able to find it in the description.
Yeah, it's called user story analysis. So what it gives the team the time they need to actually think about that story. So it has 6 points. The first one is text analysis. Remember at school, we were reading sentences and making syntactic analysis about it, which is what is the subject, what is the object, the adjective, etc. It turns out that that famous sentence pattern of the user story we're not very good at it. And we don't know why we're using it. We don't know how to write effectively that one sentence. Also, we don't know whether we are allowed to add another sentence because there are more to add. But is it not forbidden to add more to that story? Should it be only one sentence? Or maybe I'm expected, and I played the role of a junior product manager, and I've been working with those people that are really confused about what a story ticket should consist of.
When you say that one sentence, I assume you're talking about the classic template as a persona, I want thing, so that purpose, right?
Yes.
So do you think in your template, like, are people using that framework still and expanding on it, or would you just scrap it? Because I could go either way on this. Like, I've heard people really object to it, and as long as the so that is there, as long as people understand the so that, I do not care what the sentence structure is personally. So where do you go on that?
I don't care either. What I care is that it's clear, it's complete, it makes sense. There are no extraneous fluffiness in this piece of text, whether it's a sentence or 2 sentences or a paragraph. It makes sense. It's straightforward. It's not ambiguous. There are no contradictions. And it's a little bit, again, counterintuitive, but what I tell the teams I'm working with is that it could be vague. It could be missing some details because you don't have them yet, or because you need the engineering team, or you need the marketing team, or somebody else to help you with the details. There could be something missing. It's fine. But we need to try to be still precise with it and not write nonsense there, or just fill the paragraph, or just fill. And what I'm seeing very often is that the authors of user stories are actually confusing the goal and the task. And what happens is that it ends up with some sort of solution proposal, and the team just take it, okay, I need a button, and the team adds a button, and then it turns out that it shouldn't have been a button at all. It should have been a new page or a report or something completely different. And I've been there. I've seen it so many times that it's ridiculous. The fact how one sentence is written, and maybe I'm a little bit of a nerd about the purity of the sentence, but to be very reasonable, it's really ridiculous how much time is wasted because we've tried to spare a sentence, Instead of writing 2-3 more sentences, really put all our knowledge into that ticket, it's one sentence, then the team will discuss it with the team, and the team just says, oh, it's fine, we'll figure it out, and then what we already mentioned. So the first step is really to learn how to write, literate, well-articulated text, because this is the first input to the engineer, to everyone, to the stakeholders to prioritize, to engineering team, to the product managers, for yourself to remember what it was about and not waste time, because the moment a word is missing, the team will ask, and then it's 5 people on that meeting or 6 people, and then you start a discussion and you already eat 20 minutes that should have gone in another direction. So it's really ridiculous. Small things like the quality of the text, really make huge difference about how the entire development will proceed next.
So I like what you're saying here, about having, if you're going to be communicating an artifact, that it should be a really well-articulated artifact, and especially the separating the goal from the task. I think that is like a fundamental problem. Like if I understand what the goal is well enough, like whatever misapprehension has occurred in how they're articulating what the task might look like, as long as I'm helping them achieve the goal, like I'm pointed in the right direction. I've talked to people who, and I was kind of surprised to hear this, said they had never talked to the person that writes their tickets, that they don't even know where these things come from. Now, someone might hear, who thinks that that's a sane way to work, might hear what you're saying, like, yes, we just need to get the handoff perfect, and then they'll never have to talk to the people who wrote these things. So, do you have any reaction to that?
I haven't. I really thank you for pointing that out. User story analysis it's a collaborative practice, and the way it's built in the board is that you actually need. I recommend that you have all the stakeholders involved there, and that those refinements or clarification meetings are open for the tech team, for the business team. I hate calling teams tech and non-tech, but for the people who write and implement the thing, and for the people who actually need it. It's actually very few companies realize that there are a lot of customers and users, especially for software as a service and platform as a service companies, that there are a lot of customers and users who would like also to participate. If you give them a free trial, for example, you have access to the people who need that. You have access to the people who write that. It works for outsourcing teams. It works for in-house team, for product companies that get together. And the fact that there is a handoff, it's already a problem. But that's the first step, the text analysis. Then the second step is the context analysis. And that's the place where the team asks why. This is the place where you realize that there is a scope creep, or that there is a scope cut, which is much more dangerous actually. The scope cut is a moment where the author assumes that something will not be needed, and then it turns out that not only it's needed, but it's much bigger than it should have been. This is most of the cases. There were unplanned discoveries. There was something unplanned happen. Of course, something unplanned will happen when you didn't spend 5 minutes asking why there is a problem. There was a recent tweet: first ask what is the problem, and then how to solve the problem. But there is a zero question here. Is this really the problem? Mm-hmm. And that's the second step. Is this really the problem that we're solving? Maybe that's not the problem at all. Maybe that's the assumption of the customer, or the assumption of the author of the user story. Intense conversation, asking why do we need this? Why do we need this? Why do we need this? It's not really the 5, 4, 3 whys technique. It's really getting deep into the reasoning and justification, because I've been part of big functionalities that were obsolete the moment they went to production. The customer didn't want them the moment they went to production. They didn't serve, they didn't fit the purpose because nobody asked why. So that's where immediately you can't work with handoffs. You need the source there. And it doesn't take much to organize it, actually. It's really a matter of routines and habits to get everyone involved and everyone interested in that user story at that meeting. So these are one of the two first very powerful techniques for me. The third one is something that came from developers, and I'll be very honest here, who called their users stupid. How could they did not now know that? How could they click here? Why they didn't do this? It's written, it's very obvious. Users are not tech savvy. And regardless of how fancy our UI look, very often, even I have difficulties figuring out what I'm supposed to do here. And when it comes to myself, I always do the wrong thing because it comes from the testing instincts and habits. But users are not supposed, and they shouldn't know how it's supposed to work. They need a task to be finished, a job to be done. They're in a hurry, they're tired, they're late for their kids' performance, and all of this. So the third technique is, I call it user visualization. It's a moment to close our eyes and imagine we are the users. And not weird, or it depends. It could be 9 a.m. on Monday and we could be late for a very important business meeting, freezing outside, forgetting we have forgotten our mittens, and we want to call a cab, and that app didn't work, and we hate it, and we want to throw our phone in the garbage. Or it could be Friday night, 10 p.m., late for home, and we want to, order food for the family, and that app wouldn't take my credit card or something like that. So imagine there are real people out there that are using our software. They are tired, sick probably, have got the cold, they're exhausted, they're in a hurry, they're excited. Excitement also is very bad feeling. It could be from good reason, for a good reason, but it's bad for dealing with crappy software because you again don't have the patience. Now, nobody has the patience, and it's right after their yoga class to deal with your crappy software. So that's the time for the user, for the team, to really put themselves into their users' shoes and immerse into their users' reality. And I have, 20 questions. It's there. Where is your user now? How your user is going to use your feature. It could be one button, it could be a whole new component, it could be your entire system. The size doesn't matter. Where is your user right now? So this is something that I think it's very important, critical for engineering team, really for engineering teams, because as you said, some of them are so distant from the end users that they cannot imagine who is using the code they're writing today. This is missing today. It's missing in various teams and projects and products.
I really like what you're saying about not blaming the user for not having the same exact mental model in your head that you as the developer had, because who cares what you as the developer think that the software is supposed to do? Reality is in production. Reality is what's happening out there with the users. Their expectations are really paramount. And I know not every user is always going to have the same expectations, but generally, our systems have to be ergonomic. They have to be designed to meet humans in their context with the assumptions that they are going to make with their various distractions because they're trying to do something else. They're not trying to be the master of the mental model of the software developers that last worked on this. Assuming those software developers even had the same model, which is dubious in and of itself. My a recent video on resilience engineering that I've got, Intro to Resilience Engineering, talks about this in some depth, and talks about it in safety science. There was a time, and it's related to the transition from safety 1 to safety 2 that has occurred over the past few decades, of people understanding that human error is just an attribution. Humans behave rationally within their local context and their incomplete information that they have. And so you need to design a system that is capable of making that locally rational behavior actually rational, rather than just finding the first thing you can attribute as a human error and stop thinking. Sidney Decker's The Field Guide to Understanding Human Error is something I could recommend on that.
Very good mention, because that user story analysis is also kind of the system to not attribute bugs to developers' errors. Developers don't have the context. 1 sentence is not enough. 5 minutes for discussion is not enough. Without the agenda, you cannot thoroughly discuss that feature from all the perspectives. And this is where the fourth frame, task step from the agenda comes. It's the business side. It's place for the author, for the product manager, the business analyst, the stakeholder to justify in front of the team the need for that feature. Yes, we asked why do we need it, and probably we've figured out the context already, the limitations, the assumptions, the constraints. They could be various, we know that. But then, long term, how that user story or feature or epic aligns with our business vision, with our product vision. What are the risks? Do we really understand as a team, as the entire group of people interested in and involved in the realization of that story, the needs, the goals? What are the qualities that needs to be achieved and maintained? And the most important, what could go wrong? This is the first step where we start asking what could go wrong, what are the risks? And the risks very often are not technical. The next step is the quality and testing step. We'll deal with that. But here is the place. It's kind of vague still, that step. I'm not sure how it will be perceived. There are mixed feelings about it because it's not so clear and so engineering, but I've seen how features were built without any relation to the big picture, to the full picture. Where are we going, and do we need to invest that time into that particular feature? Maybe not at all. And then when I talked about what I meant about risks, is that business risks, communication risks, dependencies from the customer, third-party dependencies and they're maybe not technical at all, are the most difficult to manage. You can work around the technical risk, but it's very difficult to work around the human risk. So all this is the place to really consider vacations, sick leaves. Very often, account manager changed somewhere, or the CTO changed somewhere in a partner vendor, for example, or they released a new API and didn't tell us because we're not in good relationships right now. So relationship and communication risk are very, very important. Nobody talks about it at a refinement meeting.
I can't personally recall any story refinement meeting in which high-level business strategy was remotely discussed. This is kind of interesting to me because over the last few years, I've realized this is where a lot of my blind spots are as a developer, as a site reliability engineer. Things will happen that in hindsight, like, my priorities would have been completely different if I'd have known this is what was happening at the level of abstraction of business strategy. So I like that. I think that you might get a lot of resistance to actually doing that, but would like to see that kind of change in the world, whether it's in that particular ritual or just generally the information flowing that way. Because I don't really think that the software technical strategy can exist in isolation to the business strategy. They're maybe driven by separate people, but their futures are linked.
They are, and that's yet another absurd we're living in, because business people are complaining that engineers are not so interested in the business and in the product roadmaps and in the requirements and talking to customers. On the other side, engineers often like to stay isolated from it, and so I don't waste my time with business thing. I want to write my code, but then they get more and more distant. And as you said, if everyone from the team is on the same page, we will take much better decisions at the right time and spend so much troubles later. Because that's one of these huge problems. The scope cuts and the scope creeps come from the fact that there is a gap. In many companies, there is a gap between the product people and the engineering team, and the engineering team assume that the story is well thought, it's everything that it's necessary, and it's not all of the times. And then the product, the authors of the user story assume that the engineering team will figure it out. Magically, somehow, without communicating, it can't happen. So the entire business strategy and product vision are, as you said, very vaguely touched on some company meetings or town halls or all hands on all of these. But if it's not repeated if it's not confirmed and affirmed on daily basis, on a weekly basis, that this is where we're going, then how would you expect commitment from the entire team? You want a very committed team. You want the team, or for me, I like to be part of the cause of a company when I join a company, to really believe in their mission, vision, purpose. How would you build that just randomly if you don't really align the daily work to your mission, vision? Key results and numbers don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen that problem. I'm resisting the urge to go off on a whole rant about OKRs and the various delusions that can accompany them. I don't mean to say that OKRs can't be done well, but, we've all seen them done poorly so often. I think people want organizations to be tractable. They want them to, especially large organizations, they want to slice them up into their departments. And, this department is this department because 10 years ago we carved it up. And I want to be able to just manage that separately and put someone in charge of that, and it'll just work out. It seems like what you're saying is that this is systemic by its nature. You cannot untangle the components from each other. They must be like wired together, but that sounds very difficult, right? Like people do that. And you mentioned, nowadays you're working more often with startups, right? Like, and hard enough to get, 30 people aligned at a larger organization. Definitely think, yes, systems thinking is what we need. It is by nature our blind spot, but it's also very hard. It's all tangled up. You can't just have everyone communicating with everyone all the time. So what's an incremental step, that moves us in the right direction at a large scale organization?
I would say be brave, actually, because we say it's difficult and we never try. It's almost impossible to break the boundaries. Once an organization is well structured and it believes in its structure, it's very, very difficult to make those boundaries a little more thin. What I've seen, though, is in one of my last assignments, one of the good modern practices is random one-on-ones, and their bots and apps that arrange meetings with various people, especially with the remote work. It's very famous practice to meet engineering with finance, or I don't know, design with marketing. That's probably with tech support, let's say, or something like that. Now, to really mix people and to make them talk to each other informally. And Every time I talk with someone that is not from my immediate circle, from the engineering or product or design or tech support, like it's from finance or business or account management or sales, there are huge revelations and epiphanies happening in those conversations. Oh, we didn't know that. Especially sales. I've all these years in my experience, salespeople and the people who demonstrate your product to customers, they don't know how it works. And it's not their fault. Nobody told them. Yes, product reviews and sprint reviews were supposed to demonstrate the new features to the stakeholders, but somehow nobody from the people that actually is going to demonstrate, from sales departments and account managers, are invited to those sprint reviews. So it's common sense. It's following the common sense. It's not following the scale. It's not trying to scale up and to make a meeting with 1,000 people in it, or with, let's say, 30 people in it. But in large organizations, these meetings actually happen. And the question is, do they actually need to be there? So inefficiencies they propagate regardless of the size. It's really a matter of following the information and making sure everyone that needs to be informed is informed, and everyone who needs to be taught is taught about that feature or that problem and is asked. Favorite example, deadlines. Give us an estimate how much it will take to make it until next Friday. No, it usually comes for a reason, and the engineers are never aware of that reason. One of the big projects I was working on, the customers could only accept new releases twice a year, and it was during the holidays because it was training center, and in the other days of that year, there were courses running there. So we were providing training equipment. That's the case. They're only closed for Christmas and Easter. This is a real deadline. You need to fit within, and you need to meet it. There's a real deadline, but very often teams are not aware, and especially when it's, as I said, give us an estimate, but it needs to be done for yesterday. Then all this information that is missing is really demotivating, because if the team knew that there's an actual urgent reason for that deadline, and it might not be, ego, which is usually the reason for a deadline, but an actual physical reason, they will feel much more motivated about it. So something very also interesting about talking to other departments and getting them on those meetings is that I would say it, even though, again, I claim that I don't like it, but non-tech teams can really benefit from the engineering thinking, and vice versa. You cannot imagine how efficient the finance team in a company is. The finance team is one of the most effective and well-organized teams at a company. But engineering don't know that, and they can learn a lot from it. And there's not so much difference in the work. You would say, but we're creative knowledge work, and they have strict, pure maths to do and pure regulations to follow. That's not true. They have much more incidents, so to speak, dealing with 1,000 customers from various sizes, countries, and etc. So talking to each other and actually bringing at the source, the start of working on a feature, and usually this feature is for the finance team, for example, it's insanely effective for both the stakeholder and the developer, because they learn from each other. It's eye-opening. I've seen that. It's eye-opening. Very often you get, again, the sales representative or the account manager for one particular user, that stupid user, and then the account manager actually tells you the story of that user. Who are they? How big they are? Where they're coming from? Where they're right now? And why do they are so much complaining about the feature and are always wanting something new, and it's always not working for them, which is frustrating for the team and for the developers and testers. But there are actual reasons for that. So get them together. That's not so difficult. You don't need 30 people, you need 3. But it's usually only 2 in the meeting.
That's great. So be brave and just get the different people talking to each other as a first step. Very important. I remember after Steve Tenen, who's a theory of constraints expert, suggested to me when I was asking him about getting started with theory of constraints, one of the things he told me was talk to finance team. And I thought, my brain broke a little bit because like no one in my entire career has suggested that I exchange one word with finance team about anything ever. Like, and so I went and called up some of my friends, right? Like, among other people who had more than 10 years of experience, like, 50 years combined experience, one of them had talked to a finance team one time. Like, something's got to be wrong here. That, like, our directors are all talking to finance, but none of us ever talk directly to the only source of truth about money in the organization. Very strange. This is really good thought to end on. And on this show, we like to end with a quote. Do you have any quotes that you like?
One of the first sentences ever I've read about testing and quality is that it's a mental discipline. So what I like to usually use in my presentation is that testing and thinking about quality is all the time, continuous, constant validation whether you're doing the right thing. It might sound exhausting, but that's why it's a mental discipline. It's part of, I don't want to call it a mindset, but we can learn, definitely. It can become a routine. Life changes every day. Circumstances change every day. People around us change all the time. So we need to constantly adjust and adapt to the circumstances and whether we're still on the right track, whether we're still doing the right thing, whether did we learn anything new now and we need to change. So always ask whether you're doing the right thing.
All right. Testing is a mental discipline. And as Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, with patience, the most tangled cord may be undone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray.